Hello, friends. Jim here. Want to discuss with you what appeared on online publication EOS. Current efforts not enough to keep warming under 1.5 C. A canyon between current efforts and necessary action means global temperatures are on track to rise far beyond Paris Agreement goals. Well, we just had what recently, at least 2 days or so, where temperatures were 2C above baseline average. So what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to have 2C broken consistently within this decade? Who knows? Probably on track for that. The world is on, and by the way, before I get going here, got Smokestack releasing a whole bunch of stuff, right? The world is on course to see global temperatures rise as much as 2.9 degrees C above pre-industrial levels if current climate action commitments remain unchanged. This is according to a report released by the United Nations Environmental Program, or UNEP. The UNEP Emissions Gap Report is a yearly review of the gap between countries' current climate action commitments and what those commitments should be to keep Earth warming under the 1.5 degrees C limit set in Paris, which is supposed to be legally binding international treaty. This year's report found yet again current efforts by countries to limit warming are insufficient in the face of accelerating climate disasters and still increasing emissions. The most optimistic scenario presented in the report forecasts that there's just a 14% chance that humanity will limit warming to 1.5 C. That's most optimistic scenario, which means there's an 86% chance that humans won't limit the warming to 1.5 degrees C. Or if you want to put it in probability terms, the probability event happening is 0.14. The probability event not happening is 0.86. And therefore, the future is going to bring worsening floods, heat waves, disease, crop losses, precipitation bombs, droughts, fires. We know the list. We're seeing it. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, said that the emissions gap is more like an emissions canyon. A canyon littered with broken promises, broken lies, broken records. Although progress to limit emissions has been made since the Paris Agreement went into effect in 2016, many countries have not upheld all of their commitments. Average global temperatures briefly surpass 2 degrees C above pre-industrial levels on Friday, and I guess the next day as well, according to preliminary data from the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecast. 86 days this year alone, 2023, recorded average global temperatures surpassing the 1.5 C goal. And though countries have made progress, greenhouse gas emissions worldwide are still rising. From 2021 to 2022, global emissions of planet-warming gases increased by 1.2%, setting a new emissions record. There was a brief decline in 2020. That was due to the pandemic. And then the pandemic was declared over, and everyone just went right back to it, right back to business as usual. Things ramped up again. And a lot of these gas emissions are a result of, coal-fired power plants. So there's this, for example, also in Europe, they're shutting down the nuclear plants, and then when they cut off the gas supply from Russia, they did what? They actually went and activated coal plants. Ooh. The Paris Agreement 1.5 goal marks a warming limit above which hundreds of millions of people will face worsening climate impact, such as frequent life-threatening heat waves, severe droughts, reduction in water availability. You've heard me discuss that. Catastrophic flooding, reduced crop yield. You've heard me discuss all these potential events. Current pledges are not enough to avoid these consequences, according to the report. Instead, current mitigation efforts are on track to allow an increase of basically 3C, basically doubling what the Paris called for. And I guess there's a COP, was it 28 coming up soon? What we need to see at the COP is a massive expedited movement on decarbonization, said Inger Andersen, who's the executive director of UNEP. Well, we all know what a farce the last COP meeting was. Do you really expect this one to be any different? I'm not holding my breath. Accelerating mitigation. According to the report, countries must slash their predicted 2030 emission levels by 42% to remain under 1.5. To cut emissions this dramatically, rapid climate action will be needed. Leaders must drastically up their game now with record ambition, record action, and record emissions reductions. In a press conference, Andersen emphasized the need for world leaders to halt work on new fossil fuel infrastructure as well. Governments can't keep pledging to cut emissions under the Paris Agreement and then greenlight huge fossil fuel projects. Per capita emissions also differ widely across countries. The US, for example, accounts for 4% of the current world population, but has contributed 17% of all warming since 1850. Inequalities between countries' emissions highlight the need for countries with greater responsibility to accelerate their climate action and contribute to funds such as the Green Climate Fund, meant to help developing economies adapt to and mitigate climate change. So, this very, I would say, damning report, calling it as it is. So, it's good that they didn't really sugarcoat it. Couple things. Ocean heat content. That's still a thing. And it's going to be a thing for a long time. You're going to have heat diffusing to the atmosphere. Even if just 1/4 of the heat content in the ocean diffuses to the atmosphere, the rest, staying being moved around, advected around, horizontally to, melt, polar sea ice. That is still going to be a huge amount of energy put into the atmosphere, going to add to the increasing temperature rises. A lot of people cite the DEI, the Earth Energy Imbalance, as like the most important stat. Well, it is an important metric, but I also think it's incomplete. They tend to look just at the top of the atmosphere. What is radiated in, what radiates out, what's trapped. Well, energy comes in UV range. It's absorbed. It's absorbed by the ground, absorbed by the atmosphere, absorbed by the ocean. We burn fossil fuels. We put that energy in the atmosphere. It's absorbed by the oceans. But what happens? Thermodynamics informs us that when you have a body and it absorbs energy, it's going to radiate that energy. So the radiation that the land, the oceans absorbed, right? It's going to radiate out. And if you have an imbalance in the sense of the oceans absorbing 93% of what we have burned and put into the atmosphere, that is a massive imbalance. So I think when they calculate the Earth energy imbalance in terms of how many watts per square meter, I think it's an underestimation. They're not fully taking into account the flux of heat energy from the oceans, which is greater than that from the land because due to the specific heat nature. They're not taking that into account, which, in my view, greatly adds to the energy imbalance of the planet. And we're seeing data indicating this. There's been several studies this past year. That then the folks that just calculate this, they need to start incorporating that if they want to get a better handle on the actual picture. Because right now, I think what they're presenting is an incomplete picture. I'm not dismissing their work, but it's incomplete in my view. And of course, overpopulation is the other thing. Too many people needing too much energy that there isn't enough resources for, and other resources. Land, right? You need land to house people and create food. Well, a lot of ground starts becoming stricken with drought and flood. We can't grow crops, or crops are devastated. Where nutritional quality is decreasing, the yields are decreasing. Overfishing the oceans, you're going to have mass starvation. And everything that we got going on here, all the positive feedback loops, optimistically speaking, we've locked in a 5C increase, most likely. That's optimistically speaking. It's probably going to be like 7 to 11 by 2100. And that's the other thing they say, 2.9 by when? 2050, 2100? They don't say by when. So humans are kind of, I would say politicians. You need political will, and politicians are not taking this seriously enough. Some are, most aren't. So we're not closing the gap, and we won't, for the reason I just discussed. I think kind of a gloomy prognosis. So there you have it. Thank you for your time.